Hi everybody, welcome back to another session with the last grade first and their expedition where they'll be crossing the Antarctic continent from coast to coast. My name is John and I'm here with Gareth and Richard. Hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks, John.
Hi, John. It's good to be back.
Awesome. So I think today we're going to be touching on your fitness, your training, your nutrition, and what it actually takes. We've discussed equipment and we've discussed the actual environmental conditions around Antarctica, but what does it actually take to physically get down there and to, not meaning getting on a plane, but to put your body through what it needs to go through to be able to complete an expedition like this. So yeah, if you guys can explain just a bit more about your pre-expedition training and what that entails.
Look, training for an expedition like this is massive, basically, and takes a huge amount of time. It's quite a complex sort of thing to approach, because you have to be big and strong, but also incredibly endurance fit. So big and strong enough to haul this massive sled, and then endurance fit enough to be able to cover those sorts of distances. And so our training is divided into strength work, and it's strength work in a gym, and a lot of cardio, dragging heavy tires up and down beaches, basically. We also need to put on quite a lot of weight before we go. So it gives us both the strength and mass that we need to drag our sleds, but also the buffer for when we start to lose weight on the expedition. And so the weight gain elements are all based around strength training and eating. So we've been going through cycles of German volume training, which is a tried and tested way of putting on a lot of weight, a lot of muscle mass, and fat mass in a short period of time, and mixing that in with cycles through endurance training, where the majority of our time is spent either dragging heavy tires long distances on beaches, or dragging very, very heavy sleds up and down grass tracks in a gym. And that forms the general basis of our training.
And the reason that we pull those tires along is that it's the closest you can come to replicating the action of pulling sleds along snow and ice, and so it means that our bodies are learning and practicing that action that we're going to have to repeat, tens of thousands of times as we cover those kilometers across Antarctica.
And it's not, sorry, Gareth, go.
I was just going to finish that off by saying that, yes, we need to be strong and fit to be able to drag heavy sleds long distances, but we also need to be, our bodies need to be robust enough to deal with the rigors of such a long expedition. So we need to not just strengthen our muscles, but our joints and our tendons, and to make sure that we're not picking up small musculoskeletal injuries as we go. So all the things that we do, yes, there's the bulk of the strength training, but we also do a lot of complementary, core strength building exercises to make us, as robust as possible.
And it's not just about hitting the gym and doing weights and pulling sleds there. You're also doing environmental based training where you're in the mountains, climbing, hiking, testing gear. There's that component to it as well, that it's not just about being gym fit, but also environmental based fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And our day to day, when we're working in things, is based around what we've been talking about. But then, we have very specific training where we, like you say, John, we get out in the mountains and also our specific expedition training, which we like to think of as you've got the physical stuff where you make sure you're physically good enough to do it, but then you have the skill-based stuff to make sure that you've got the skills and the systems and the knowledge to be successful. And so we sort of divide it into the two, and we do equal work on both. And getting out and getting outside and into the mountains and things is our favorite bit.
And then on that, let's jump to the field quickly before we go back to the actual nutritional value of food. But in the field, how does it? We've previously discussed melting ice and snow to get water, but how would your meals look in the field? Are you snacking through the day? Is there a certain amount of calories that you need to eat? And then also, how are you consuming all this food that you need to consume?
Yeah, so we've got a fairly well thought out and detailed plan about how our daily nutrition is going to work once we're in Antarctica itself. And I mean, essentially, one of our great challenges has been to try and take our daily food requirements and get it down to as little a weight as possible. And we're hoping, and we think it's achievable, is to get our daily food per person down to about 1 kilo. And that'll be an ideal small amount. No other previous expeditions have really quite managed that yet. We think we're working with some really exciting companies and trying out some new technology, and we think we can probably do that. And essentially, that's made up of 2 main meals a day, which is your breakfast and your dinner, and then multiple snacks through the course of the day. So I think everything is freeze-dried to make it as light as possible. And so including our breakfast. So first thing in the morning, we'll be having a prepared breakfast, very high energy, sort of slower release food with, and the details of the food that we're taking has been sort of thought about quite carefully. We're going to make sure that we've got all the key vitamins, minerals, micronutrients all built into this, because the expedition is so long. We've got to make sure that we're getting those things that on shorter expeditions you can kind of manage without, but we're out there for such a long period of time that a really holistic approach to your nutrition has to include all those really small detailed elements. So we'll have our breakfast, and then we'll pack up the tent and we'll get set off. And then over the course of a polar day, we'll basically ski for an hour and a half, have about a 10-minute break, and then ski for another hour and a half. And we'll repeat that pattern about 5 times or 6 times potentially over the course of the day, before we then put the tent up and begin the process of melting more snow and preparing our main dinner meal. And then each of those 10-minute breaks, we'll be having a snack. And again, each of those snacks is going to be carefully designed to provide us with the energy that we need to get us through the next hour and a half skiing. And there's no, and your stopping time has to be very carefully calibrated, because you get cold really quickly. Because when you're moving, you're generating quite a lot of heat. But as soon as you stop, you start to cool down, and cooling down and reheating again wastes energy and is uncomfortable. So we want to minimize how much time we're stopping and how much time we're cooling, but we need to make sure that we're regularly having food. So there's no such thing as a proper lunch break. You never stop for more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time. So you just have lots of identical breaks over the course of the day, taking in as much food, fluid, energy, nutrition as you can in those breaks, and then repeating that cycle before you get to the tent and have your actual main meal in the evening.
Okay. I think one of the important points that Rich touched on is that, this is a long expedition, 3.5 months, and we need to be eating real food over that time. It's it's not the type of thing where you can just kind of get away with eating sort of food that doesn't really do the job and doesn't tick all those macronutrient boxes and the micronutrient boxes, especially the vitamins and minerals that really keep your body ticking over. And we're working with Firepot Food in the UK, and they're just a tremendous company, and they make they make the best outdoor food. They essentially dehydrate proper meals from spaghetti bolognese to chili and all these different things, and in the way they do it, they essentially lock in all the goodness of real food rather than making something just for a freeze-dried meal. They will make food and then they will dehydrate it in their special way, and it locks in all the goodness. So we've been looking very hard at the best people to provide our nutrition over that time, and I reckon we found them in Firepot. And so so like Rich said, the two most important meals of the day will be breakfast and dinner, and then we'll be looking at the different snacks that we have throughout the day to again meet those nutritional targets. But so food and sleep are the two things that are going to keep us ticking over for such a long time. So it's a huge area, but we reckon we're on top of it.
So it's definitely not your bowl of Weet-Bix in the morning, and then off to work you go. It's a bit more complicated than that.
Yes, slightly. And the other thing is combating flavor fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to eat the same thing every day for 3.5 months. So we're looking at that pretty closely as well. And there's a lot of science going into the food that we're taking, but we're also very mindful that food will be one of our only pleasures, our only release. So it's not all science. There's going to be some tasty stuff in there, maybe a chocolate pudding at the end of every week or something.
And I was going to say it also plays very much into your mental state of mind, because as you said, it's that repetition of food. There's no break in that. The flavors all become the same after a while. So if you can break that before you even get into that situation, you've already won one battle there. Earlier you mentioned that you guys are going to try and get your food weight down to 1 kilogram a day. My assumption would be that because of the people who you have partnered with, Firepot and your other nutritional partners, that 1 kilogram of food would have a high calorie value or a high nutrition value, which would exceed the weight of a 1 kilogram piece of, or a 1 kilogram meal. So even though your weight of your meal is less, the nutritional value might be that of a 4-course meal, for instance.
Yeah, so we're trying to lock 5.5 to 6,000 calories into a kilo, and to space that out throughout the day, across our meals and snacks. And that's a challenge, and it's part of the challenge of the expedition, and we're working at it. And like I said, if we can do that, that's one of the key parts of the expedition cracked. But not, within that, there's also subtleties like we love tea. We drink a lot of tea on expeditions, but if you could, especially Rich, if you can imagine, 200, if we had 1 cup of tea each day, 220 tea bags, which, don't weigh very much at the start of the expedition when they're nice and dry, but a wet frozen tea bag actually weighs quite a lot. And if you've got 220 of them, that's a lot of weight that you're dragging at the end of the expedition. So we're looking into powdered tea and various other unpleasant things to try and make weight.
But those are part of the sacrifices for the expedition, and to complete it, it's you're leaving your bags of tea behind, but there is an alternative to the tea, and it's part of the mission of getting to the end of the expedition and making sure it is successful.
Unless we get sponsored by Twinings, and then we'll take as many tea bags as they want.
Unshameful plug right there. Come on, guys. And then, yeah, just another question on the snacking throughout the day. It's, you obviously can't, if you want to melt ice for water, you need to put your tent up and put the stoves out, and it's a whole process. So for drinking water, how do you work that through the day? And then also for snacking, you can't have a meal because you'd again have to put your tent up to sit down inside and have the meal. And you also can't take your outer layer gloves off because of your exposure to the elements and the risk of frostbite. So just how are those two things navigated on the day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's a good question. So essentially what we'll do is we'll melt some water. So we melt the day's water in the morning over, that sort of first breakfast and getting yourself ready in the morning period. And then we'll take it with us in thermos flasks over the course of the day. We can't use normal flasks because the water would cool down and freeze. So they need to be thermos flasks, just not to keep the water hot, but just to keep it liquid.
Yeah.
And that provides us with our drinking water. We might add some flavorings or some stuff with some vitamin tablets and fruit flavorings and things, partly for our own sanity. It tastes nice, but also to keep going with that sort of nutrient component as well. And we'll also add small amounts of water, probably, and this is a bit of a work in progress, but probably just small sachets of specifically designed dry snack pouches, and allow those pouches to soften as we through the hour and a half before we have the next break, and then we can eat those sort of rehydrated pouches at the next break, and we'll tuck them into a wee pocket next to our bodies to keep them warm and liquid as we go. And so we'll have all this little cycle where you make the pouch for the next break at the end of the preceding break. And then by the end of the day, the idea is that you'll have got through all of those wee pouches and you'll just have a little bit of water left in one of the flasks to begin the process of melting snow again. And anybody out there who's got experience of melting snow and ice for water will know that it's really, really important to have a little bit of liquid water to start with. You've always got to prime the melting process with a bit of liquid water, or else you get this phenomenon called sublimation, where you put water and you get a hot pan and you put snow or ice into it, and it just goes straight from being ice to being gas and doesn't go through the water phase at all. And so your water just disappears, your snow just disappears. So you've always got to have a little bit of liquid water to put in some snow and ice and to melt the next stage. And that's essentially how our sort of daily water cycle will work.
We could talk for hours about the subtleties of the meals and what goes into them, and electrolyte profiles for drinks during the day and things. And I suppose it's suffice to say that every meal of the day and every snack will be scrutinized to make sure we're getting a balance. That means that by the end of the day, we're not only getting 6,000 calories, but we're also getting X amount of proteins, X amount of fats, X amount of carbohydrates. So we're covering all our bases. And that's where all the work's going.
Yeah, and as Gareth said, on equal par with all of those considerations is keeping it enjoyable. And we've mentioned in previous blogs just how important psychology is to the success of this expedition, and enjoying your food and enjoying your drink and enjoying your wee snacks and your treats is a fundamental part of that psychological robustness that we're going to need to maintain.
So on that note, are you going to be packing a bag which will say day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, knowing that that bag is equal to X amount of calories, and then we can sit in the expedition head office and we can just sneak little treats into each bag for you guys as a surprise that you don't know what you're going to get for that day, or because would that just make your life easier on the expedition to know that you're picking up bag 1, you're picking up bag 2, and so you go through it? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the major things about this expedition is that we're going to try to do as much work as we can before we go. So, every day of the expedition, our food will be packed into a bag, as you say, and every meal in that day will also be packed. So, on the morning of day 61, all we have to do is look at our pulse and grab bag 61, and we know exactly what's in it, or maybe not exactly what's in it, but we know that we have our nutrition for the day, and we don't have to mess around with finding things. So we try to make it as easy as possible, and do as much work, as I said, as we can before we go. And so putting the meals together will take a very long time, but it's part of the success of the expedition.
And if you're going to sneak in the odd treat for us, John, you just have to promise to make sure it's a really light treat. If I get to the end and I find a brick in bag number 110, I'm not going to be amused.
with a bow on it.
So that
Thank you. Congratulations.
1 kilogram block of chocolate is not going to be in bag 110. We'll put that in bag 1, so you at least know that it's there and it's already disappeared by the time you get to the middle of the expedition. But guys, thank you so much once again for sharing your time and insight into the expedition. I look forward to catching up with you guys again soon. And I think we've got 2 or 3 more sessions left, and on the pre-expedition discussions. But I'm sure we're going to have many more going forward. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, John.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure.
And if you want to hear some more and you like what you've heard so far, then please follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Share us across the social media platforms, and subscribe to our newsletter for all the latest updates.
Thanks. And also, if you guys have any ideas of what we can sneak into their expedition pulks, into their food bags, let us know what you think we should put in there. Thanks, guys. Have a great day further.
Cheers, thanks.